mid-November of 2022, police responded to a reported robbery at a gas station in Houston, Texas. At the scene, an Uber driver told officers that he had picked up a couple who kept changing their drop-off location after getting in the car. This went on for about a half hour before the driver pulled into a gas station parking lot and instructed the pair to exit the vehicle. When they refused, he told an attendant to call the police. Later identified by police as 27-year-old Frank Luis Blanco and 24-year-old Destiny Suzette Guerrero, the suspects beat and stomped on the driver until he fell unconscious, then stole his wallet and car. The victim received medical treatment for a concussion, brain bleed, broken orbital eye socket, broken nose, abrasions, and lacerations. Police arrested Blanco the following month and eventually located Guerrero. In June of 2023, the pair each pleaded guilty to a federal charge of carjacking with the intent to cause death or serious bodily harm. Blanco was sentenced to 10 years in prison while Guerrero received a 6-year sentence, and they'll both serve 3 years of supervised release once they regain their freedom. Because there's no parole in the federal system, they'll be required to serve the vast majority of their prison terms behind bars. Number 17. Francisco Valadez. After finishing her shift at an adult club in Indianapolis one morning in September 2024, 30-year-old Shanti Dixon summoned an Uber to take her home. She was picked up by 29-year-old Francisco Valadez and was never seen alive again. The following day, Dixon's family tracked her phone and found her murdered, unclothed body next to a wooded area behind her apartment. She had been shot in the head and the phone was near her body. Investigators traced the woman's last known movements and interaction to Valadez, who initially claimed that nothing unusual had happened during the drive. He quickly changed his story, told detectives that he had heard a gunshot right after dropping Dixon off at her residence. Valadez said he had called the police department's non-emergency line to report the gunshot, only to later claim that a black man had approached his car and robbed Dixon at gunpoint. According to this version of events, the supposed thief shot Dixon in the thigh and she ran from the vehicle. In the meantime, the Uber driver's mother told investigators that her son regularly carried a gun and that he had cleaned his car recently. Valadez reportedly changed his story a few more times before admitting that he shot Dixon. At first, he claimed he had acted in self-defense after Dixon started hitting him in the head while he was driving, but his stories continued to fall apart and Valadez finally came clean after apparently realizing that he wasn't going to lie his way out of the situation. According to detectives, he admitted that he was a virgin and that he had offered Dixon money in exchange for intimacy. He claimed that the woman laughed at his body, causing him to fly into a homicidal rage. Authorities charged Valadez with murder, attempted abuse of a corpse, and more. He remains behind bars without bond at the Marion County Jail with a tentative trial date set for November. Number 16. Jacob Willhoit. An otherwise normal day in Seligman, Arizona, took a harrowing turn for a gas station customer in August of 2023 when a woman entered the store with a handwritten note pleading for help and handed it to the patron. The message said to dial 911 and described the vehicle the woman was riding in as a blue Honda van. It also clarified the direction the vehicle was traveling in along Interstate 40. The customer immediately called law enforcement, and deputies from the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office rushed to the area in search of the vehicle. She was able to provide descriptions of the woman and the man she was with, as well as what they were both wearing. It would later be revealed that the woman had been abducted from a Phoenix area car dealership the previous morning. Police caught up with her captor's van and arrested 41-year-old Jacob Willhoit, who was reportedly wearing a wig and posing as an Uber driver. He was attempting to drive to Las Vegas while restraining the woman, and there were several guns in the vehicle. Willhoit was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping, aggravated assault, unlawful imprisonment, harassment, intimidation, and threatening. He remains in custody at the Yavapai County Jail pending the outcome of his case. The sheriff's office commended the quick-thinking actions of the victim, the customer she handed the note to, and the deputies who responded to the customer's 911 call. For the time being, many of the details surrounding the case, including why the victim was targeted and how she managed to sneak into the gas station to hand off the note, are unclear. Number 15. Matthew Scott Flores. 74-year-old Lyft driver Gary Levin's family last spoke with him before he picked up a customer in Delray Beach, Florida, in late January of 2023. They never saw or heard from him again. On the day Levin vanished, he drove 36-year-old Matthew Scott Flores into Okeechobee County. It was here that Flores reportedly shot Levin and dumped his body in a remote wooded area before stealing his car. Over the following days, Levin's red 2022 Kia Stinger was spotted in parts of Florida that the senior citizen had no reason to be in, serving as an indicator that he had met with foul play. The car was eventually seen in North Carolina, prompting federal law enforcement to alert local authorities to keep an eye out for the vehicle. Not long after that, the car was seen again, and a high-speed chase ensued across 3 counties before the vehicle was disabled by spike strips in Ellenborough. In a last-ditch attempt to avoid capture, Flores attempted to flee on foot, but he didn't get very far and was quickly apprehended. As it turned out, he was already wanted in connection with another homicide, which had occurred roughly a week before Levin was killed. Flores was initially detained on suspicion of charges he incurred while in North Carolina, including eluding law enforcement, speeding, and intoxicated driving. He has since been charged with premeditated first-degree murder, robbery with a deadly weapon, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The accused killer pleaded not guilty while prosecutors planned to seek the death penalty. No trial date has been set, and the case was recently delayed until December. Number 14. Dani Morad Avicias. A Florida woman experienced a real-life nightmare in January of 2024 when she woke up unclothed in a Miami motel room with no memory of what had transpired after a certain point in time the night before. She was sore and injured, and a few $100s was missing from her purse. The woman remembered that her friend had ordered her an Uber from South Beach, but she had gotten into a similar-looking car being driven by a man who was merely pretending to be a rideshare driver. Identified by police as 49-year-old Dani Morad Avicias, the suspects reportedly drove the woman more than 20 minutes away to the pay-by-the-hour motel she woke up in the next morning. The victim would later testify that Morad Avicias lured her into his car by encouraging her to get in the vehicle. One of the woman's friends even told her that the car was not her Uber, but the suspect seemed so sure that she was the person he was supposed to pick up that she went along with it. While Morad Avicias was a registered Uber driver at the time of the incident, he was not the driver who was assigned to pick the victim up, and he wasn't clocked in on the app. He used the woman's credit card to fill his gas tank and pay for the motel room. The circumstances surrounding how the woman lost her memory of the night's events are unclear. Suspecting that there were other victims, investigators encouraged members of the public to come forward and share their experiences. In the meantime, authorities charged Morad Avicias with fraudulent use of a credit card, unlawful possession of identification, and assault. About a month after the suspect's arrest was announced, the Miami Herald revealed that 3 additional victims had come forward with allegations against Morad Avicias. One woman woke up in the very same motel several weeks after the first reported incident. A man matching the suspect's description could be seen dragging her out of a vehicle and carrying her to a room, which was paid for using her credit card. In another incident which occurred around the same time, 2 women were picked up by a man resembling Morad Avicias while waiting for an Uber. They accepted a drink from the driver and began drifting in and out of consciousness. The women managed to stay coherent enough to instruct the driver to take them back to their hotel, but the suspect still managed to steal their cell phones. He also snapped photos of their credit cards and used the information to make unauthorized purchases. Morad Avicias has since been charged with multiple additional kidnapping, theft, and fraud charges, and is being held without bail at the Miami-Dade Metro West Detention Center. Number 13. Mark Filinov. In August 2018, the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office in California received a call from a group of 3 women who accused their Uber driver of kidnapping them. One of the victims, Theodora Furstenberg, later told local station KCRA that 36-year-old Mark Filinov was driving her and her friends somewhere after a book club meeting when he suddenly said, "Okay, now you're going to tell me the real story or we're all going to die." Filinov had been quiet during the beginning of the drive and the women didn't understand what he meant when he made the bizarre statement. He began passing exits on the interstate, prompting one of the women to dial 911 from the back seat. At that point, Filinov exited the highway. They were already several exits past where the women had planned to get off the interstate and claimed that they ended up having to jump out of the car. After investigating the incident and reviewing the physical and electronic evidence, authorities issued a warrant for Filinov's arrest for kidnapping. He was detained in lieu of $375,000 bail and banned from using the Uber app. During a court hearing about a month later, Filinov's family members insisted that he was in a mental crisis at the time of the incident and that he's not a threat. His defense attorney highlighted his lack of a criminal history and argued that Filinov wouldn't be a criminal but for his mental health issues. The victims felt differently, especially considering Theodora Furstenberg's claim that Filinov had stalked her at her home after the terrifying Uber ride. Much to the defense's disappointment, the judge chose to keep the bail high, citing the need to protect society. While updates on the case have not been forthcoming, records show that Filinov is not currently in state custody. It's unclear whether he served any prison time. Number 12. Michael Hancock. While working an Uber shift early one morning in June of 2018, 29-year-old married father of two Michael Hancock picked up 45-year-old Hyun-Soo Kim, who was on his way home from a karaoke bar in Denver, Colorado. By the time they reached Kim's destination just 2 miles down the road from the bar, he was extremely intoxicated and uncooperative. He refused to exit the car and passed out, so Hancock drove around for another 70 miles. At some point during the drive, Kim woke up and the men got into a physical altercation. Hancock would later claim that Kim had made unwanted advances toward him and punched him in the face when he threatened to pull the car over. During the struggle that ensued, Hancock grabbed his gun and fired at Kim 10 times. Hancock adamantly maintained that he had acted in self-defense, but the authorities saw the situation differently and charged him with murder. Prosecutors accused Hancock of being dishonest with his claim that he was in imminent danger and placing a knife in Kim's hand in an attempt to bolster his victimhood narrative. During Hancock's trial, the defense continued fighting for Hancock's innocence, arguing that the evidence pointed toward Kim as the aggressor. The jury agreed, and Hancock was acquitted in 2019 after spending more than a year in jail awaiting trial and possibly facing many years in prison. He was now free to carry on with his life. Number 11. Kerry Calvin Gassag. In a disturbing spate of violent crimes that were captured on video, in September 2021, a 34-year-old female tourist was attacked by two different men in one night while vacationing in the Florida Keys. During the second attack, 911 calls flooded in from witnesses who reported seeing a woman being placed in a headlock and assaulted behind the famous southernmost Point Buoy in Key West. The attack was broadcasted online via the boy's designated live webcam, prompting Good Samaritans from as far away as Massachusetts to contact law enforcement. Callers also described seeing a terrified, half-dressed woman running out from behind the boy, while an Uber driver, later identified as 37-year-old Kerry Calvin Gassag, emerges while buttoning his pants. Shortly before this particular assault, a different man, identified by police as 30-year-old Jorge Calderon Nunez, had attacked the woman after offering her a ride. The victim initially accepted the ride but quickly realized that she was in danger. As she tried to flee, the suspect pinned her to the ground outside the vehicle. Gassag drove up to the scene and offered the woman a ride to her hotel. Thinking he was rescuing her, she obliged. But it wasn't long before he started acting inappropriately toward her, and when she wasn't receptive, he became forceful. Authorities charged Gassag with battery, false imprisonment, and evidence tampering. If convicted as charged, he could have faced up to 25 years in prison. He took a plea deal instead and admitted to all 3 charges in exchange for a 10-year prison sentence, followed by 5 years of probation. Calderon Nunez also faces charges for assaulting the woman, and his case appears to be ongoing. Number 10. Manny, Diaz, Massa, and Mariah Williams. In late 2022, a Houston couple attempted to rob an Uber driver outside a convenience store at the end of their ride. The incident began when the driver, Daniel Taheri, pulled into the store's parking lot to drop off 2 men and 2 women. One of the passengers then demanded him to be taken to another location, which Taheri refused. The events spiraled from there. The group ordered him to exit the car and to leave his keys and wallet behind. Despite one of the passengers pointing a gun at him, Taheri still refused and was subsequently shot. The entire group fled the scene on foot without stealing Taheri's car, and police subsequently identified 2 suspects who they believed were responsible for the crime. Less than a week after the incident, 28-year-old Mariah Williams and 19-year-old Manny Diaz Massa were arrested on suspicion of aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon. While neither of the defendants appear to currently be in custody, they both have open criminal cases, indicating that the matter is likely ongoing. Taheri was left with a deep gunshot wound and he required stitches and a blood transfusion. According to his sister, had he not turned away at the last second, the bullet would have probably hit vital organs and he would not have survived. Number 9. Gregory Black. 23-year-old Veronica Amazola, 27-year-old Kimberly Izquierdo, and 23-year-old Juvelin Arroyo were on their way home from a concert in an Uber one night in August 2023 when a gang member's Mercedes-Benz crashed into the vehicle they were riding in. 31-year-old Gregory Black was flying through the streets of Los Angeles at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. As he blew through red lights, he T-boned the rideshare vehicle, striking it with such force that it spun around 5 times before stopping. All 3 of the Uber's passengers died, while the driver and the male passenger survived with injuries. Prior to the triple homicide, Black already had 3 felony convictions under his belt and was facing 11 more. He was also serving a 5-year probation sentence for attempted murder for his role in a drive-by shooting. The accused killer is now facing 3 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter in connection with the deadly crash, as well as charges stemming from a drive-by shooting that occurred just a few months before the accident. The seemingly light sentences Black received for his attempted murder charge and subsequent probation violations caused outrage among many, including a prosecutor who said it was the lightest sentence he had seen for an attempted murder conviction in his 17-year career. Black remains in custody with bail set at $4 million amid his ongoing case. Number 8. David Knight. After drinking at a bar one evening during the summer of 2017, a Tulsa, Oklahoma woman did the responsible thing and summoned an Uber to take her home. She didn't have to go far, but instead of ending up at her home, she awoke in an unfamiliar bed at a residence she had never been to. The woman had blacked out from intoxication while riding in her Uber, and her driver, 63-year-old David Knight, had allegedly taken her to his house. She was unclothed, and she began having flashbacks of them being intimate. Knight drove the woman back to her car, and the 2 could be seen hugging before they parted ways. After returning home and noticing bruises on herself, the woman went for a medical exam. Knight was criminally charged and fired from Uber in connection with the allegations. He took the stand in his own defense during his trial in April 2019, claiming that his encounter with the woman was consensual. According to his version of events, the woman said she wanted to go anywhere but home and invited Knight out to several bars. She reportedly appeared completely willing to be intimate after accompanying Knight back to his house. The woman claimed to remember nothing prior to waking up in the Uber driver's bed and told the court that she ordered an Uber directly to her home. Knight, on the other hand, testified that the woman had acted completely normal throughout the night. A jury found him not guilty and he walked away a free man. Number 7. Jennifer Gilbolt. On a seemingly typical evening in August of 2024, 45-year-old Uber driver Shohel Mahmoud picked up 23-year-old Jennifer Gilbolt and her friend in Manhattan. Shortly into the drive, Gilbolt pepper-sprayed Mahmoud for no apparent reason. Disturbing video of the attack appears to show the young woman holding the driver's arm down to prevent him from blocking his face. In the footage, Mahmoud could be heard repeatedly crying out, "What?" in confusion, while Gilbolt's friend showed a similar disbelief and yelled at her to stop. Gilbolt could be heard saying that she used the pepper spray because the driver was brown, and she almost seemed dazed as her friend told her to gather her things and that they had to go. Temporarily blinded and in searing pain from the burning sensation of the mace, Mahmoud pulled over. Due to the chaos and confusion of the situation, he struggled just to get out of his vehicle, and he forgot to put the car in park before getting out. Luckily, he was able to get back in and put the vehicle in park. The burning lasted for 2 hours, but he declined medical attention. Shortly after the incident, police arrested Gilbolt on suspicion of third-degree assault. She was given a ticket to appear in court for the misdemeanor charge at a later date. Gilbolt has no prior criminal history, and her motive for the attack remains a mystery. Following her arrest, she was banned from using Uber and fired from her job at a public relations agency. Despite the seemingly racist connotations of her behavior, the incident is not being investigated as a hate crime. The experience traumatized Mahmoud, which in turn has affected his finances as a breadwinner who provides for his family back in Bangladesh. Number 6. Ramiro Vela. Kahendi Ayula was working as a Lyft driver in Houston, Texas in February 2024 when he received a request to pick someone up at Memorial Hermann Hospital. As staff members helped the customer, Ramiro Vela, into the car, Ayula immediately noticed that he was fidgeting and acting strangely. Out of an abundance of caution, Ayula asked several hospital employees if Vela was okay. They reassured him that everything was fine, but the man's unusual behavior escalated during the drive as he began talking to himself and beating his chest. The most terrifying moment came when Vela slid into the seat behind Ayula and wrapped his seatbelt around his neck. He then put the driver in a chokehold. Ayula pulled over while Vela kicked out his back windshield and caused other damage to his car, then ran to a nearby house and yelled while trying to enter. The homeowner called the police and Vela was charged with aggravated assault. After being a rideshare driver for 7 years, Ayula was too traumatized to go back to work after the attack. He told Fox 26 that he now suffers from constant fear and struggles specifically with allowing anyone to be behind him, especially in a car. A civil lawsuit against Lyft and the hospital he picked Vela up from is ongoing. The outcome of Vela's criminal case is unclear, but records show that he's out of custody and his sentence has been served. Number 5. Ismael English. Shortly before 3 p.m. one afternoon in July of 2023, a knife-wielding Lyft customer pulled a knife on his driver and attempted to steal his Tesla in Lower Manhattan. The rider proceeded to stab the driver, then tried to carjack 2 other drivers. Disturbing footage captured by onlookers showed the suspect trying to jump into cars as drivers fought him off and sped away. When things didn't go as planned, the man jumped off the FDR Drive overpass onto the pavement below. Identified by police as 20-year-old Ismael English, he was charged with attempted murder, reckless endangerment, and 4 weapon-related counts. The Lyft driver, 36-year-old Yadav Kumar Dungel, was seriously injured but survived. English does not appear to be in custody at this time, and updates on his criminal proceedings have not been forthcoming, leaving the current status of his case unclear. Number 4. Sukob Sueno. In early 2024, a thief posing as a Uber driver stole large amounts of money from unsuspecting bar patrons by convincing them to let him use their phone. 29-year-old Sukob Sueno of Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, was accused of transferring funds to himself from the victim's banking apps and making purchases using their payment information. An NYPD officer told the New York Post that these types of crimes are difficult to track and that thieves who steal in this fashion are unlikely to get caught. But people continue to fall for it, and it's apparently become a common way to steal. Sueno is suspected of committing at least 5 thefts in this fashion, including one which yielded a profit of more than $3,400. Following an investigation, he was arrested on suspicion of grand larceny and possession of a forged instrument. He was detained at Rikers Island in lieu of $25,000 cash bail or $75,000 bond, but no longer appears to be in custody. The outcome of his case is unclear. Number 3. Leo's Vany Roman. A 52-year-old Florida man named Ron Solveski unexpectedly lost his life one evening in December 2023 when a man in a stolen Ford Mustang collided with his minivan head-on. Solveski and 2 other passengers were riding with a 33-year-old off-duty Uber driver when the collision occurred. Solveski and the driver died at the scene while a fellow passenger succumbed to their injuries at the hospital. In addition to striking Solveski's van, the man driving the Mustang struck 2 Hillsborough County Sheriff's vehicles. Later identified as 22-year-old Leo's Vany alias Roman, he was charged with felony murder, vehicular homicide, aggravated fleeing, and eluding involving death, battery on a law enforcement officer, and driving while license suspended involving death. The current status of the case is unclear. Today's topic was requested by Fat Music, Want to Know 5964, and Tamika Davis 6641. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Dax Franco Willis. When 19-year-old Dax Franco Willis tried to bring his dog into an Uber one day in October 2023, the driver told him that his canine companion wasn't allowed. Willis threatened to pepper spray the driver, then dragged her out of her car, stole her phone, and sped off in the woman's vehicle. Police arrested Willis a few days later after releasing surveillance footage of him driving the stolen car. In early 2024, he was convicted of robbery. He received a 3-year prison sentence with credit for time served, amounting to roughly 18 months behind bars, followed by 3 years of probation. If you thought ride-sharing couldn't get any crazier, wait till you see how being rude can cost you your freedom. Stay tuned till after number 1 because we got our previous release of when disrespectful defendants go wrong. Number 1. Britney Wood. While riding in an Uber in New Zealand in June of 2024, 29-year-old farmer and model Britney Wood and her friend noticed that their driver was extremely attractive. Wood filmed herself flirting with the man, telling him that she had never had such a hot driver before. The driver responded that he had never had passengers as hot as Wood and her friend. When he asked the woman if they wanted to listen to music, Wood told him that the sound of his voice was pleasing enough. At some point during the drive, the driver missed a turn. At first, Wood assumed he was distracted by his conversation with her and her friend, but it quickly became clear why he was suddenly acting differently. Police vehicles surrounded the car and ordered the occupants to exit the vehicle. In an ironic twist, the driver was suspected of being intoxicated behind the wheel. Thankfully, the women found another way home.
It's $5,000
Florida woman Sherry Lynn yelled profanities at a judge in Miami-Dade Bond Court on July the 13th of 2015. The woman was facing several charges, including felony battery and resisting arrest with violence. When the public defender asked Lynn if she'd ever been treated for any mental health issue, she responded, "Why don't you f yourself first?" Judge Mindy Glazer smiled and told Lynn that the defender was just trying to help her. Glazer then reminded her not to use profanity or disrupt the court proceedings, or else she'd be held in contempt. When the judge ordered Lynn to stay away from the woman pressing charges against her, Lynn continued yelling more profanities. Meanwhile, Judge Glazer went on speaking calmly. She then finished off by saying, "Have a nice day, ma'am. Let's try and get you into the hospital." Lynn was ordered to pay a $50 fine and undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Number 9. Jodelle LaVille. Law enforcement responded to 5455 Northwest 5th Avenue in Miami, Florida on April the 8th of 2013 after dispatchers received reports of a domestic dispute on the premises. When officers arrived, a woman claimed that 24-year-old Jodelle LaVille punched her in the face and head during an argument. The victim attempted to flee, but LaVille allegedly chased after her. According to the arrest report, the young man pulled away from the responding officer as he tried to arrest him, then spit in his face. LaVille was charged with battery on law enforcement, battery, and criminal mischief. During his bond hearing 2 days later, Judge Ellen Sue Venza said she found probable cause against him on the battery charge. This reportedly set LaValle off, causing him to berate Venza several times. He shouted obscenities and insults at the judge while proclaiming his innocence and blaming the victim for the incident. Venza eventually sent LaValle back to his cell to give him an opportunity to calm down. The defendant was then brought back for the afternoon bond session. He was ultimately issued a $17,000 bond in order to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Number 8. Alan McCarthy Jr. Alan McCarthy Jr. from Milton, Florida, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for threatening to kill a judge. In August of 2018, the 36-year-old was found guilty of threatening to kill Circuit Judge Stacia Warren after she ruled against him in a child custody case. During his sentencing at the Justice Center in Daytona Beach on September the 26th, Circuit Judge Matt Foxman stated that McCarthy had also threatened the unborn child of a prosecutor during his trial. McCarthy subsequently exploded, hurling obscenities at Foxman. Consequently, the latter ordered that McCarthy be removed from the courtroom, but the defendant continued shouting expletives and racial slurs. McCarthy then spent the remainder of his sentencing in a separate room where he watched the proceedings through one-way glass. In addition to the 20-year sentence, McCarthy was ordered to serve another 10 days behind bars. When explaining the reason for the added punishment, Judge Foxman cited McCarthy's offer to provide him intimate favors in exchange for leniency. Number 7. Thomas Michael T.J. Lane III. 18-year-old Thomas Michael T.J. Lane flipped his middle finger at the courtroom gallery during his sentencing hearing in Chardon, Ohio. On February the 27th of 2012, Lane opened fire on 6 students at Chardon High School, killing 3 of them. After being picked up by police, he admitted to the shooting. When an officer asked him why he did it, he said he didn't know. Lane initially pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but in February of 2013, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault, all with firearm specifications. The following month, during his sentencing, Lane went to court wearing a shirt with the word "killer" written on it. He smiled and smirked as emotional family members of his victims gave impact statements. According to Cleveland 19 News, the mother of one victim told Lane that he was evil. In the end, the young man was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 6. Tobias Roman. 27-year-old Tobias Roman was accused of stalking and threatening a female employee at a shopping mall in Bakersfield, California, on January the 10th of 2012. 3 weeks later, Roman was arrested on charges of attempted robbery, making threats, and exhibiting a deadly weapon. During Roman's arraignment on February the 2nd, the bailiff told him to stand up, but he refused, saying his foot hurt. When presiding Judge Charles Bramer told him to stand up, he immediately did so and then said, "Or else what?" Judge Bramer ignored Roman's hostility and continued asking procedural questions. When Bramer read the charges levied against Roman, the latter interrupted, claiming it was all lies. The judge told him to be quiet, but Roman continued being disrespectful, telling the judge, "Yeah, you need to be quiet." Bramer then gave him a final warning, but Roman still opened his mouth, so the judge ordered him to leave. As Roman was being led out of the courtroom, he profanely vowed to murder the judge. Bramer heard the comment and noted it for the court's record. Roman was later charged with threatening a public official, to which he pleaded no contest. He was handed an 8-month prison sentence for it. The original charges against him each were dismissed except making threats. He also pleaded no contest to that charge and was sentenced to 3 years behind bars. Number 5. Bass Webb. On July the 31st of 2009, 30-year-old Bass Webb was arrested for attempting to run over 2 jail employees in Paris, Kentucky. The incident took place outside the Bourbon County Jail where Webb was a former inmate. Surveillance footage revealed that one of the workers was able to get out of the way while the other was injured after Webb's vehicle pinned him against the wall. Webb fled the scene, leading law enforcement on a hot pursuit that culminated with his car catching fire. As he was being placed under arrest, Webb admitted to officers that he'd killed his girlfriend, Mariah Runowitz, aged 32. Her lifeless body was later recovered inside a residence on New Lair Road. During his arraignment on August the 5th, Webb pleaded not guilty to 2 charges of attempted murder in connection with the incident involving the 2 jail employees. District Judge Vanessa Dixon recused herself from the case because she knew both victims. Judge Dixon told Webb that there was no way she was going to have further proceedings in which she would have to see his face. Subsequently, Webb spat in Dixon's face. The judge appeared shell-shocked before saying, "Charge him." Deputies escorted Webb out of the courtroom, though no charges were immediately filed in relation to the spitting. While awaiting trial at the Fayette County Detention Center, Webb and 4 other inmates incited a riot, during which he whipped a metal telephone box at a corrections officer. Webb was later found guilty of 3rd-degree assault and was given a 15-year prison sentence. He was found guilty of his attempted murder charges in September of 2011 and received an additional 37 years. The following year, he pleaded guilty to the murder of Runowitz and was sentenced to 50 years behind bars. 5 years later, Webb was back in court after being charged with the murder of another ex-girlfriend, which he committed back in 2003. A jailhouse tip had reportedly led to the discovery of Sabrina Vaughn's remains. The court heard gruesome details about how Webb strangled Vaughn to death and buried her body in a shallow grave. When the judge addressed Webb, asking him if he wanted to come forward, the man remained seated with a smile plastered on his face. He was ultimately found guilty of intentional murder and sentenced to life behind bars with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Number 4. Demetrius Lewis. Florida man Demetrius Lewis told Judge Tabitha Blackman she was gorgeous during his virtual bond court appearance in Fort Lauderdale on February the 4th of 2021. The 29-year-old was arrested 3 days earlier on charges of attempted burglary and possession of an illegal substance. According to the New York Post, Lewis flirted shamelessly with the judge during the hearing. Immediately upon joining the virtual meeting, he told Blackman that she was gorgeous, to which the latter responded, saying thank you. Lewis then said, "I love you." Blackman told Lewis that flattery wouldn't get him anywhere in the court of law. She then read the charges against him and asked the state for its recommendation. Prosecutor Eric Linder recommended a $7,500 bond, noting that there were 3 children present in the home that the suspect had attempted to break into. Lewis objected with "What?" causing Linder to stop mid-sentence, but Judge Blackman moved on and rendered her decision, setting Lewis's bond at $5,000. Number 3. Joseph Zila. Convicted murderer Joseph Zila from North Fort Myers, Florida, struck his own attorney during his sentencing in June of 2023. 61-year-old Zila was accused of killing a young girl and her babysitter back in 1990. The lifeless bodies, which had been beaten, assaulted, and suffocated, were found at a Cape Coral apartment in May of that year. For many years thereafter, the murders were considered to be among the most famous unsolved crimes. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted in 2010. Zila wasn't identified and arrested until September of 2016, after police matched his DNA to traces found at the scene. After he was found guilty in May of 2023, a Lee County jury recommended the death penalty. During his sentencing on June the 26th, Zila asked for the cameras in the room to be removed. Zila's attorney Kevin Shirley told Fox 4 that his client didn't want their conversation to be picked up by the TV crew's microphones. Zila tried to quietly say something to his counsel, but for unclear reasons, he uttered an expletive and elbowed Shirley in the face while still handcuffed. 2 bailiffs immediately wrestled the man to the ground and escorted him out of the courtroom. The judge kept him outside for several minutes. After it was ensured that the attorney was okay following the blow, Zeta was dragged back in. He then growled at the judge and onlookers, exposing the word killer written on his teeth. Ultimately, he was sentenced to death for the 1990 murders. Number 2. Milton Watts. A 21-year-old was given a 90-day contempt sentence after saying the F word to a judge more than 10 times during a hearing at Berea Municipal Court in Ohio. The incident was posted on YouTube in 2022 and amassed 1.5 million views. Milton Watts turned himself in after a warrant was issued for his arrest for failure to appear on a domestic violence charge. When the judge asked him why he had failed to show up, he said that somebody had died in the family and that there was no reason for him to be in court. The judge told him that it was a court order and then talked about his bond. Watts interjected saying, "I don't really give a F, to be honest with you." The judge then gave him 30 days in county jail for contempt. But Watts went on saying the F word repeatedly, with his sentence being intermittently increased until it was almost a year. Nonetheless, the judge ended up reducing the sentence back to 90 days. Watts later pleaded no contest for the initial domestic violence charge and was sentenced to another 5 days in jail. Number 1. David St. John Jr. After being accused of assaulting a teenager, 39-year-old David St. John appeared in court on January the 25th of 2021 and attacked someone in the courtroom. 4 days earlier, the Texas man, who was a convicted felon, lured the teen to a Houston motel through social media. St. John allegedly threatened the teen and forced himself on her in various ways. According to the Harris County Sheriff's Office, the victim would later claim that the man hit her with a pistol and stuck the gun inside her privates. Paramedics were called to the motel room for a welfare check and found the pair. Responding deputies arrested St. John for assault of a child and felon in possession of a firearm. As the charges were being read to him during his court appearance, he suddenly walked to the front row shouting, "Did you learn your lesson?" He repeated the question, apparently speaking to a man whom he then hit in the face. The shocking incident was caught on video, which accumulated more than 1.5 million views on YouTube. In the video, the victim ran off after being hit. An officer rushed over and tackled St. John to the bench. While the defendant was being cuffed, he continued to speak to the man he punched, telling him, "You need to learn your lesson so you don't end up like me." It was unclear why St. John attacked the man, but as he was being escorted out, he said, "Don't end up like me." In May of 2023, he pleaded guilty to the 2 charges against him. He was ordered to register as an offender for life and was handed a 25-year prison sentence for each charge, which would run concurrently. St. John could be eligible for parole after serving half of the prison sentence, but as part of the plea agreement, he cannot appeal the conviction or punishment. Thanks for watching. Would you rather share a cross-country Uber ride with a random couple and their crying baby, or have the car all to yourself but with a 14-year-old driver without a license behind the wheel?